What is going on, everybody? We are live. We are getting ready to get started with our new weekly live stream with Quinn from Man of Medine. Once he gets on, he will send us an invite and we will do a dual stream. This is the new weekly dual stream. If you're a regular, you are already familiar with our Wednesday dual stream with Alchemic Mason. But we now have a Tuesday dual stream with Quinn from Man of Medine, and I'm hoping I can convince the guest that we're going to have Saturday. I have a guest coming Saturday for astrology. I'm hoping I can convince her to do a weekly thing, but we'll see. So thank you all for being here. We'll be getting started shortly. There we go. What's going on, everybody? What's going on? If you guys haven't seen my no, that's not him. I don't know who that is. Maybe it was someone trying to play the game. But if you guys haven't seen my latest YouTube video, please go ahead and check that out. And last week's video with Quinn from Man of Medine is also on the YouTube channel, which is also under the Mystical Rebel. So if you like my content, please do give me a follow over there. We all have heard what may or may not be happening with TikTok. So if anything goes down and TikTok goes away, I would still like to be able to contact you guys. So what is going on, everybody? What is going on? We are just waiting for Quinn from Man of Medine to hop on. We usually start the live stream around 9 p.m., so we're about a minute or so away from that. Once he hops on and sends us the invite, we'll go ahead and get started with the live stream. We have some questions that we're going to be discussing this evening. I think you guys would be interested. I think it'd be an interesting discussion. So, if you can't name 5 spells, I don't want to hear your opinion. Oh, there he is. There he is. There we go. Just want to make myself a little bigger. Doing pretty good. Yes, Corey Root. Grimoire is, for the most part, Solomonic. Not all of it is Solomonic. You do have things like the Virum or the Faustian Grimoires, but the most popular ones, at least, are Solomonic. The entire tradition is not, but the most popular ones are, yeah. But yeah, man, how was your day, bro?
Can't complain. Didn't do too much, I kind of devoted myself to getting a little bit of study on these topics that you sent me. Kind of went a little overboard, like wrote some essays.
It's okay, man. I love it.
But obviously, I'm not going to be sitting here reciting, essays. It's just nice to have some notes so
Yeah.
we're not rambling off at the neck about something we think might be fact or so. But yeah, everything's going great. How's Delaware? Yeah.
Yeah. It's all right over here. I mean, I can't really complain much. I had to go to the office today. You know, I go in the office twice a week. So that's Tuesdays and Wednesdays. The 2 days that I live stream are the 2 days that I have to go into the office. But my boss is on vacation, so uh, kind of able to take it a little easier than normal. Still got a lot of work to do, but I was able to take it a little easier. Hey, Solomon Keys, welcome. What do grimoire and Solomonic mean? All right. Well, I guess I'll answer that, and then Quinn, I'll let you give your perspective on that because that's a good question. What do grimoire and Solomonic mean? So grimoire. So I'm going to assume you're talking about what we're talking about, not just the word grimoire, but the actual practice of grimoire magic. So if you just mean the word is a French word and it means grammar, which essentially is just like instructions within a book to do something. But I'm going to assume that you mean the practice. So the practice refers to grimoire tradition. This is a collection of texts that range anywhere from, I mean, at least the ones that I have, for anywhere from the 11th century on. I'm sure there may be books before then, but all the ones I know start around 11th century. They may cite older books, but for the most part, it starts around 11th century on. It was popularized during the Renaissance, but most of the texts are of Judeo-Christian or Islamic origin. You may find some texts from the Hellenic region, but for the most part, they are Judeo-Christian or Islamic. And they outline methods to, for the most part, get in touch with spirits or make talismans according to the Jewish mythos and all of that, utilizing things like the sacred names of God, sigils, planetary days and hours, using certain planetary placements and things like that to accomplish those goals. Whereas Solomonic is a subset of that. So Solomonic is within grimoire tradition, where the methods are attributed to Solomon and his gaggle of priests, I don't know, and his son. And it's said that he used these methods to help him bind the demons, to help him build his temple, to help him, maintain his wealth, to help him rule his empire, because he had, a vast empire down there in Israel and all that. So yeah, and I'll let Quinn go ahead and give his
Yeah,
song.
so like Joe said, Grimoire, um, they say I don't know if they for sure like found that the etymological root is to a grammaire, but that's what a lot of us pretty much have said what it has its origins in. So grimoire, like you said, meaning grammar. I like to distinguish it from a spell book because I think a spell book is what comes after the grimoire. So you have your grimoire where you learn how to communicate and you learn how to interact with the spirits and call them forth. And then once you have that established, then that's when all the other like fun stuff comes in to where you're actually working with the spirits and writing out like your conjurations and your incantations and so forth. Uh, and the as for the Solomonic part, you could explain Solomonic magic through two definitions, and that's like the literary definition, as in like the grimoires that, as Joe was talking about, there's usually a address to his son Roboam. I think that's how you pronounce his name.
I think it's
Robo
Rehoboam.
Rehoboam. Is that
Yeah,
what it is?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I think there's a ho in there.
yeah.
Rehoboam.
So you could distinguish them as like it's Solomonic because there's the address to Rehoboam, or there's the what is it, the pseudonym for like Solomon, like a fake author name. So even though it's not written by Solomon, it's usually attributed to King Solomon. So those two things you will find in grimoires that you could call it a Solomonic manuscript or and so forth. And then there's also the type of magic, the evocation of spirits and the binding of spirits, and the particular process that those techniques entail, as in like the consecration of tools, the invocation of divine names and angelic names, and so the evocation of the spirit, the constraining of the spirit, the binding of the spirit, and the licentia or the license to depart. though you could call that all a the Solomonic process, but then at the same time, I know that those particular steps that the Grimoire traditionalists deem as the Solomonic process, like you'll find in the technique Solomonic Magic by Stephen Skinner. I know that those techniques aren't exactly exclusive to Solomonic magic. I'm sure there's other magical traditions that have a license to depart, a welcoming of the spirit, a constraining technique, a binding technique, and so forth. So I would say that both of those you could define Solomonic magic through the process and techniques, and then through the what it says in the literature. But I think it's more clear to go by what how the manuscript is laid out, who it's attributed to, as in King Solomon, and the address to his son Rehoboam.
Very well said. Very well said. All right, let's do one more question from the audience, Quinn, if you're okay with it, before we get started with tonight's actual topics. And then, guys, we'll do another Q&A towards the end. That's how we usually end it off with a Q&A. But let's see here. Unless you have questions on your end, we can take one from your side.
I have one question. They asked if I did my ritual on Thursday, and yes, I did. So let's let's go ahead and we could address that later if we have some time. But yeah, let's go ahead and follow through with the questions you have over there, and then continue with our topics.
All right. So, where was it? I'm going to mispronounce this, and I'm sorry, but Lehuali, or Lehua Lee, asks, what are your thoughts on the parts of the occult that use evil practices? That's a very good question. So I'll go first on this. So as a hermeticist, I agree with free will, right? I don't believe, that uh, God has any sort of uh, he's not puppeteering anything, right? So humans would have free will. And when I was coming up in the coven that trained me from 13 to basically 18, I mean, it was 17, but 2 months before I turned 18, so 18. I was taught that you are the magician and your will be done. Are if we emanate, I guess is the right word, from God, right? And God has a will, and his will be done. If we come from him and we are made in his image, then we also have a will. And our will should also be done, right? As above, so below, as it is on earth, so shall it be in heaven. So if that will is to do evil, I guess in some ways you could say, unfortunately, that's your prerogative to make that choice. But you also would have to be prepared to either deal with the consequences of that choice or deal with someone else's will who might act against you. So I don't think that there's any spiritual reason that people do evil. I think they have a free will. And if that will is to do evil, then that's what they want to do. They should just be prepared for the consequences or people acting against them. So that's how I would answer that.
Yeah, um, people, it's their prerogative to do with magic as they do. If someone is doing like baneful magic at more in the context of um, like say trying to repel someone from their life, and therefore working a way to where they're fired from their job and they have to move or something, or something happens with their parents and then they have to move to be closer with their parents, but they're trying to get out of the relationship with that particular person because that person is abusive. Then there's a gray area there. It is working against someone's own will, kind of taking away their free will, but at the same time you're trying to balance out the situation because you're being abused by that person. So there's that gray area there. For people that are just straight up doing evil magic, I'm hard pressed to think of like any instance, I'm sure they're out there, but any instance where people are doing baneful magic without some type of revenge in mind. You know, there is some type of wrong that's been done to them and they're trying to right it. Um, I really do enjoy like reading and like working conjure from like Semoise. Is Semoise? Semoises?
Uh, Hoodoo Sen Moise, yes.
Yeah. I like how he talks about how there is an equilibrium to be met, and if it is not, if that equilibrium is not met by you doing baneful magic, then then it won't be done, or it will be done, and then it will e- e- like recalibrate to reset the balance. So, for instance, if you do something bad to someone, it might equal out to something bad happening to you, and not even in a karmic sense, but usually if you're living your life where you're trying to get over one on other people, you're usually attracting the same type of vibes and same type of people to where they're gonna get something over on you, or it's just like, you know, attracting that wrong that crowd, you know. So I think it comes down to a balance. I don't really see anything see it as wrong because it's hard to think of someone that's just like doing a spell so genocide happens. You know, it seems like strange in my mind, but hey, there's crazy people out there. But either way, like, you know, the universe is going to find its way to balance itself out. You know, good and evil and so forth. So I that's not my place to say. You know, I that's where I'm gonna give that old Christian saying, you know, only God can judge me type thing.
Excellent question, Lahu Ali. Thank you for that. And guys, if you're interested, I think the book that he was referring to is this one here, Working Conjure by Hoodoo Sen Moise. So if you're interested, this is the book that he was referencing.
Oh yeah, Power
And
of the
then,
Occult said San Moise is what he says how it's pronounced.
oh,
Moise.
Moise.
Yeah,
All right, there you go. All right.
guess it's Cajun.
Oh, okay. All right. So, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started with tonight's topics. If you do have any questions, please hold them until the end, and we'll be more than happy to go ahead and answer them. But we're going to go ahead and get started with the topics for this evening. The first one is one that probably has been around not only the occult community, but also the paranormal community for quite a while. And that is the use of Ouija boards. And the question that I posed is, do legitimate occultists use Ouija boards? So I'll let you, Quinn, go first this time since I've been going first. Um, I'll let you go first this time for the first question.
Um, so I personally don't know of any magicians within the Solomonic practice that use Ouija boards. Within particular systems of Solomonic magic, you have, like, say, for instance, the table of practice used in the Trithemius method, drawing spirits into crystals. You have the wax almadel used for evocation in the Ars almadel within the Lemigan. Yep, there's your table of practice. And then you also have your table of practice from the Ars Paulina, which is in the Lemmigan and used for angelic evocation. That is the third book in the Lemmigan after Thursday Goetia. Um, and all of these, which use a shoe stone or crystal, and they all also have nomina magica inscribed on them. And there's particular protocols um, that are used in conjunction with these tables, as in like conjurations and prayers and so forth. And so these divine names and the conjurations and the prayers, these really help filter out any spirits that you're not really trying to attract. If you look into like the old accounts from John Dee, he often talks about how he'd be constantly praying to angels, but more than angels would show up, not just what he wanted to show up. So these Ouija boards, they really lack this sense of spiritual safety, I guess you could say, and vetting procedures. Not that it can't possibly be done with some implemented into the use of these, but they're kind of like extending like a free party line to out to the spirit realm, or like within your vicinity. So I wanted to talk about a pretty cool instance where a spirit board can be used in the context of evocation.
Yeah, please.
And there is a book called Magister Officiorum by Julio Cesar Odi. He's one of the few Solomonic practitioners that has a book out kind of detailing his actual visible accounts of spirit evocation, along with
Yeah.
John R. King and Steve Savidow and so forth. Um, he integrates all different types of cool techniques from Obeah into his traditional goetic approach, along with
Okay.
some more modern techniques. So it's a pretty cool book. It's pretty short and straightforward, and actually very simplistic. So in this book, he has this thing he calls the Black Table of Bune, and he or Bune, however they pronounce it. And now, so this table, it's used. It comes from the whole Spiritist movement of you doing seances, and of course, a lot of the Spiritism techniques were also they also expanded into like the New World and stuff. So you would see a lot of these techniques utilized by like the African diasporic traditions and so forth. So this table, it sits over the sigil of Bune, and you and other practitioners will hold hands in seance fashion. You also have like a rosary made of bone that you will wear for protection, and you all recite to the Pater Noster prayer, and after reciting that, you you will get a sign. I don't know how many times you would recite it, but you will get a sign from the spirits through either the medium and or clairvoyant that is within the group, or if you don't
Mm.
have a medium, you could use a spirit board. And so you were supposed to perform this like for a consecutive 4 or 5 weeks, same time on Wednesday at the hour of Saturn for 4 weeks on the dot, because consistency is the key here. So after reciting this prayer and you're waiting for this sign, if once you get some type of sign that a spirit is there or like on the board, that is when you ask Bune to dim the candle lights, to make the room cold, or something that not all spirits really have the power to do.
Right.
Um, and then so that is how you get the sign from this. And if after doing this, depending on the capabilities of the magicians, they're actually able to bind the spirit of Bune to, say, a skull or even a living animal. And so that's where like the binding process would come in. But I thought it was really interesting how you brought up this Ouija board, and I was like thinking, is like I don't know of any Solomonic practitioners that use Ouija boards, and then I
Yeah.
remembered Magister Officiorum. He talked about actually using it in this ceremony in replacement of a medium.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And hey, I am Issa. Welcome. Glad to have you here. So I would answer it almost similar to what you said. I don't know anybody that uses a Ouija board from a legitimate practitioner's point of view. I know a couple who have experimented with it, but have found it unreliable. There are far more effective, far more efficient methods of contacting spirits. Nobody wants to sit there and spell out every word like you're in a text message, when you could Skype with evocation or or even invocation, or you could, gate walk to them or something like that. Um, I find Ouija boards are unreliable and highly inefficient, and I don't know anybody that uses them. Um, I tend to agree with Donald Michael Craig when he talked about the Ouija board, because I sure to share his sentiment that most people, if you're a real practitioner, it's a different story, but most people are not getting in touch with anything when they're using a Ouija board, and the very few that do happen to get in touch with something, uh, he calls them astral nasties, which are um, so like how if you don't banish, often enough, the leftover energy could sort of form together and kind of take on a life of its own. Well, regular people, even if you don't do magic, if you argue a lot in your house, if there's a lot of depression going on or whatever in your home, those pent up energies could form together and sort of become a semi-conscious. And that's sort of what people are getting in touch with when they're trying to use the Ouija board, trying to contact, grandma or whatever, instead of a legitimate spirit. And these beings are low level nothings, wouldn't be able to tell you anything of value. They're intelligent enough to yes, no, but if you ask them a question of any substance, they're not going to be able to answer for you. So, uh, yeah, I do not personally think that any legitimate practitioner uses a Ouija board. Also, Ouija boards do not open up portals or anything like that. Again, the worst you're going to get in touch with is that built up energy that you didn't remove. And again, it can kind of take on a life of its own. And 9 times out of 10, that built up energy is negative, right? And so if that energy builds up and it doesn't have anywhere to go, it's going to wreak havoc in your life. So then you think you're all demonically possessed or whatever, and now you're calling the priest when all you had to do was do a simple banishing and you could have taken care of the problem. So you're not opening up any portals or any nonsense like that. You're simply giving the built up energy a way to now interact. And you need to get rid of it with a simple banishing, and then you'll be okay. Um, but yeah, you're not getting in touch with any sort of spirits unless you know what you're doing. But then if you know what you're doing, you would know that it's unreliable and no one really does that. That's not 12. So yeah, that's how I would answer that.
You know, I would I would go as far to say it's like having a car without a motor. You just have the shell, the body. If you
Mm-hmm.
were to do it like the method that I described, if it was to be implemented as some sort of actual like medium between the realms, and you assist the ceremony with actual conjurations and actual ceremony and so forth, um, it you might come across some a little bit of a different effect. You might get different results. Uh, but most of the time, when people are using these spirit boards, they don't have any of that, and they're just sitting there, trying to talk to it, and like what makes you think that you're cool enough for the spirits to talk to you if you're just sitting there talking to the board game?
Right. Without even calling them, that's the thing. It's like I'm sure everyone has seen some kind of a show or movie or played a video game or read a book or read a comic or something where there's witches or wizards or warlocks or sorcerers or enchanters or whatever, druids. And with the exception of the stupid little horror movies where people do use Ouija boards, in any other fiction, when it comes to magic, there's always a conjuration, there's always a summoning, there's always a initiation of contact. There isn't just you're just wandering in the woods and you go, "Hey, spirits, are you there?" and they pop out of nowhere. You have to call them, right? And while yes, it is fiction, if you know anything about Hollywood, you know that the writers do their research and they do have consultants on set, and those consultants do do their best to make it as real seemingly as possible. And a lot of times they'll use real conjurations, they'll use real sigils, they'll use real names of spirits, they'll use real names of grimoires, they'll use real names of historical magicians and things like that in their movies and TV shows, especially nowadays. Maybe not so much back in the 80s and 90s when no one cared. But nowadays with the internet, people can do their own research. So people want authenticity. That's what Hollywood gives you, and it's based on some form of reality. There's always a conjuration. There's always a summoning. There's always an incantation. There's always an evocation. There's always some sort of initiation of contact. And we don't have that with the Ouija board. You just sit around with your friends and you go, "Is anybody here with us?" Ooh, and hopefully it moves around. So yeah, that's how I would answer that question. Yes, Solomon's magic is real, very real.
And another point about what I was talking about, that method was talking about like 4 to 5 weeks of consistent like attempts at it.
Yeah,
So I wasn't just sitting down and something happens. It was like, no, for 4 or 5 weeks, at the very minute of that hour of Saturn on Wednesday, you and the same people, the same environment, same everything get together and do it the same time, the same, and everything. So it's a lot more than just sitting there and asking questions, for sure.
exactly, exactly. Exactly. Are you all picking on the guy that was summoning the goat man in the woods? No, but I do have a video, debunking that nonsense. But no, we're not. Um, okay, let's go ahead and move on to question number two. Question number two is very interesting, and I'm interested to hear what you got to say. I see this here, but it's different when you actually say it. Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the question is about chimeric bindings of spirits. So the fusion of two seemingly separate spirits, for example, a spirit of, say, a dead animal, like a fox or something like that, fused with the spirit of a genius Loki, right? Or the spirit of a land wight or whatever, something along those lines. And these are I've seen them termed chimeric bindings, right? I've not seen any instruction on anything like this. I've only seen the after effects, so the final result, and I've heard about it from two practitioners that are initiated into a form of British traditional witchcraft and Kimbanda, which is South American, both of which I'm not a member of, although I have knowledge. I was not aware of the chimeric bindings until I came across it from these two. So, what are your thoughts on the fusion of spirits? How do you feel about that?
That one's like, because like we all know that skulls have been used as vessels for spirits.
Hmm.
Um, like the, so skulls have been used, and then for binding spirits, and not only that, you go all the way back to like shamanic traditions where they wear animal bones and skulls and so forth for ceremonies to help channel the spirits of that particular animal and so forth. Um, so it kind of to put together two different animals, it makes sense in one perspective, and then it doesn't make sense to like the way that I see to how my cosmology works, and like in sympathetic and correspondence. Uh, like for instance, if I have a if I am trying to channel the spirit of, say, a snake, and I have snake bones or snake skulls in a pot or something, and I'm using that within a ritual. If I was to have the snake bones along with, say, the skull of a bird, or say the bones of two different animals that make up a mythical creature, like a griffin. Yeah, we're going off of kind of a mythological lore,
Mhm.
you know, and to me, when you use if you were just to use the bones of a snake, those are actually the bones of a snake. You know, there's like a residual essence to that. You know, you could look at, the skeleton of a snake and know that, oh, that was most likely a snake, if not like a lizard. It was a reptile of some kind, you know?
Right.
So it resembles a form of something of what it once was. But if we're talking about chimeric, formations, that it seems like it's having to do a lot more with folklore and mythology. Not that mythology and folklore can't inform magical practice, because it often does, but there has to be that line whether like it was real or just mythology, you know? And I kind of find it hard to believe that I could take a pot if I'm trying to. I kind of find it hard to believe. So, like I was talking about Bune earlier, and his appearance is of a dragon with three heads: a griffin, a man, and a dog. Now, if I was trying to make a vessel for Bune and putting those three skulls into it, then I guess that might work. That's just something you would just have to experiment with.
Yeah.
I say because I haven't experimented with it. I have no experience of it. But at the same time, those spirits of the Goetia have been said to appear as something totally different from what the book says. So you can't
Yeah.
really depend on that. So that theory is kind of out the door. You know what I mean? So it sounds cool, but to me, it's not working with anything that actually happened within our natural world.
Right.
I guess you could get into like an egregoric current where they
Yeah.
live within consciousness and so forth, and there is an essence to the griffin. So you're trying to channel this essence of a griffin, so it becomes much more like more of a symbolism, and not an actual tethering of a spirit, you know? So I can see as that trying to channel the virtues of the chimeric being, but as into actually binding a chimeric being to it. Well, I have yet to say whether, the spirits actually have a solid concrete form from what we would perceive on in this realm.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up the egregores because that's kind of what I'm leaning towards. I've seen the final result, but I can't guarantee or verify that that end result is because of the fusion of two actual spirits. Being that I don't know the creation process, I would not be able to come up with a verification method. Um, yeah, there would be no way for me to verify. I would just have to trust that the practitioners are not lying. So I would assume that what they're actually doing is probably taking the qualities of whatever, and they're making sort of like a mimic of whatever it is that they're really going after. So earlier I used a fox. So if they're really going after a fox, right, they want to be quick and fast and cunning and sly and all this other stuff, quiet, and that's how they want the spirit to like operate. They would program a servitor with those qualities, and then they'll program a servitor with the qualities of what did I say earlier, a genius Loki, and then they'll fuse the servitors together and they'll offer that, right? Rather than actually taking the spirit of a fox and the spirit of a genius Loki and putting them together. Now, I will admit that both these practitioners have said that this is a form of bespoke sorcery. So this isn't something that's like widely practiced or anything like that. This is something that's like only the people who know about it, and you got to ask about it, and then you're told to go to someone who knows someone who knows someone, type of a thing. So, but again, I go for repeatability. That's the one thing that I preach on my channel a lot. If I cannot repeat it and get the exact same results or similar results enough to you, that if I didn't know that that's what you did, but we talked about it without saying what we did, I would know that that's what you did, right? If it's not like that, then I don't believe it. So in this case, if there's no way for me to verify, that you actually took a genius Loki and a fox spirit or whatever and did some ritual or whatever and fuse them together, and then I can repeat that, you probably just use servitors. And that's fine, but you should probably just say that they're servitors. I don't think anybody would care. But yeah, I don't know if I am fully on board with the fusion of two separate and distinct spirits, even if they are of the same sympathy. I think sovereignty is a big thing, and like you were saying, there's nothing like that in nature. And again, as above, so below. So if it happens here, there should be a mirror of that in the other side, and vice versa. So
Yeah, and I think those mythological creatures were portrayals of something more subjective, of like a particular condition of like our human existence,
yeah,
bravery
this
and
is what
creating
most myths are. Yeah,
movement, and so forth. The phoenix rising up again, revival and so forth. So they were much more subjective and had to do with a topic rather than an actual being that has a spirit within it. Now things do have a certain essence to it. A rock, I mean, like everything has an essence and a spirit to it, but not in the same sense that like us, like humans and living animals have spirits. You know, the spirits of the rocks, I think, are gonna differ from the spirits of living things.
right.
Um, but when we're talking about mixing things up, I rather than binding the chimeric bindings of a spirit, I could see possibly if you're going to do if you're trying to appeal to a particular force, to get something done, then using different types of animals in that might be something that is plausible. For instance, I'm cooking up a plan to make a bag, a Jupiter bag that I am going to take to Las Vegas when I visit to get a job and procure a lease. And I'm going to put some stuff in it and then bury it in Las Vegas as like a seed to plant, a magical seed to plant for to grow life there, with my family.
Very
And
interesting.
I am planning on using not just sigils of Jupiter, being of luck, prosperity, and expansion. I am looking to use two different types of dirt. Dirt from a post office, once again, because of the transportation of things, and then dirt from a plant that is growing within my own home. So it's taking like the essences of home and growth of a residence and then transportation together and putting them together, combining forces to make to kind of add to this virtue of relocation of a family and of a household. So
Like
if we
that.
were to look at animals and the skeletal remains of animals, if you were trying to say, if I was to use, like in the Goetia, we got the lion skin belt. The lion is supposed to signify courageousness, or courage. And I also wanted something that could strike fear somehow and put like, say, the head of a snake on its buckle or something. That right there, in a way, is somewhat chimeric, you know,
Hmm.
at its essence with the lion and a snake I think there is a lion and a snake creature in mythology as well. But I could see that. I could see that working very well. Um, but that is not the same as actually binding or fusing two spirits together from using the skeletal remains of two different animals. That one, like I said before with the Ouija board topic, it's up to debate, and you have to experiment with it, see if you get any results from it. If so, document it and let me know.
Yeah, dude, I would love to know how they engage in that sort of thing. Um, like what even the ritual process would look like to use two separate spirits together. I don't know. Maybe it's not even a traditional ritual. Maybe you have to like go into alchemy or something crazy. But um, oh, okay, they're just having a conversation with each other. Okay, all right. Uh, great. All right, so we got two more questions here, guys, and then or topics, I should say, and then we can move into a bit of a Q&A with you guys. Um, all right. So topic number 3 is Goetia without the ceremony. Is it possible to engage in veritable contact with quote unquote Goetic entities without using the magic of grimoire tradition? So I'll let you go first, and then I'll go ahead.
So I had fun writing about this one. This is one of those. Would be for sure a hot topic. Because you see a lot of modern practitioners these days that they really do push this whole sense of not needing all of these tools and implements and all the protocols that you see within conjuration or
Hmm.
conjuration grimoires. Um, and rightfully so, you could argue that. But the thing is about like Goetia, like we could obviously be talking like that's a nuanced subject when we're talking about Goetia. We could go all the way back to um, to the Greek origins of it, to the ancient Greek origins of it, as Jake Stratton Kent, the late great Jake Stratton Kent, has illuminated in his Geosophia, talking about the ancient Goes and how Goetia came from a word that had to do with the wailings and howlings during funerary rites. So Goetia was originally having to do with ancestral veneration and also working with chthonic deities in conjunction with appealing to the chthonic deities in conjunction with working with chthonic spirits like the deceased, your ancestors, and so forth. So you had that mixture of necromancy that you will see in like the PGM, where you're trying to conjure a dead gladiator for a love spell, and then you also have the howlings and wailings, these funerary rites for your loved ones who've moved on. So you could even say at a very in a very technical sense that ancestral veneration can be seen as somewhat goetic because they
Hmm.
are dead. Um, and as if you read I know you've read Geosophia. I'm in the middle of the first book. He's very much talking about like their world was veneration of the underworld. You had to please the dead.
Hmm.
And you back into Mesopotamia, they made sure that even some of the dead had like straws going down into the burial site so they could give them food and water and so forth and offerings to make sure they were pleased, or else they'll come up as ghosts and as pissed off ghosts and haunt you. So you had to make sure that you took care of your dead.
Hmm.
Uh, so we could see that as Goetia, but then of course over time it transformed. Magic assimilates, magic migrates, it transforms, and now as we see it today, we know it as like the Ars Goetia from the Lemmigeddon, or Crawley's Goetia that he stole from McGregor Mathers and and so forth. So can we? So I think the best the way to put the question is, can we engage with these goetic entities or the Goetia of Solomon without the protocols and the tools? Now, the
Hmm.
protocols and tools can be seen as like two different things. So, to understand the tools, we have like the dagger, the sword, the wand, the ring, triangle, circle, pentagram, hexagram, lion skin belt, so forth. Pretty much the majority of these tools have to do with protection and authority.
Hmm.
Okay. And you're implementing these to not just somewhat protect yourself from a spiritual attack and protect your psychological state and emotional state and somewhat physical state, but also to show authority that you are someone that's serious, that you have the authority, you have divine authority, not just the authority of the Christian God, but a cosmic divinity.
Hmm.
Um, who are underneath that jurisdiction. So that's what these tools are doing. Now, let me be honest here. These tools aren't actually used for calling the spirits. They are used for when the spirits are there and to protect yourself and to show that the hexagram of Solomon, like, hey, show yourself in a visible form that isn't, that is suitable to my eyes, speak audibly and so forth. Do not harm any person or animal within it, from me calling you forth. And everything like that. All of this has to do with protection and authority. So, seeing that these aren't actually used in the calling of the spirit, and it's mostly the conjurations that are used, I I would go out on a limb and say, yeah, you can call these spirits without any of those crazy implements. Um, Now, when it comes to particular protocols like the conjurations and the prayers and the like cleansing, the bathing and fasting and so forth. I think the fasting might be a little bit more. You could argue a little bit more with that one. Um, you know, I particularly don't eat before ritual, so I'm not digesting food while I'm doing like a 3-4 hour ritual.
Hmm.
Um, and then also I do the bath or I wash myself with fair water that you do at the beginning of every goetic ritual. It has to do with being hygienically pure. So, like the Egyptian priests wouldn't eat fish, and they made sure they were shaved from head to toe, so they were clean, and they didn't want to reek of any body odor, because, as we know, these spirits are attracted by sweet fumes, and they are repelled with asafoetida and sulfur. So, if you
Hmm.
stink, what good is that going to do if you stink? So you want to make sure you smell good. So you wash yourself, make sure you're clean, your space is clean. So it has more to do with something more practical rather than spiritual when it comes to cleaning and fasting. Um, and then the prayers, you could argue with that one. Whether the prayers are Christian or not, it's mostly having to do with aligning yourself with something more divine rather than materialistic goals. So you could live when you are praying to a higher God or so forth, to something divine. You have your aspirations set on something beyond material desires and so forth. Which, let's get it straight. Usually, when you're appealing to a goetic spirit, you're asking for something material or mundane, right?
Yep.
Um, and then also along with that, doing all these prayers and conjurations kind of puts you into this trance state where you are more susceptible to be receptive to the things happening around you. So if you've ever read something out loud for a long time or talked for a long time, you get a little lightheaded, you haven't eaten, you tend to be a little bit more receptive when you sit there. during the conjurations, you take a pause and listen and see what you could hear and so forth. So those protocols, they could be argued with. The conjurations, as for the protocols, I think the divine names have been used for so long. I think there are keywords in there. A lot of people don't like to use them. They're like, oh, it's disrespectful to spirits. And I'm like, I really don't think spirits find those disrespectful. I just think that they are terms that have been laid out for centuries, and they now abide by that if done correctly. Um, Much like the divine names will kind of keep their more chaotic sides at bay is part of their nature. Just like if you put water on a fire, it's going to put it out. The fire doesn't hate water. It just happens that that's the nature of it,
Exactly.
you know? So I really think the divine names within the conjurations are needed. Uh, with my last evocation, I did switch up the words of like commanding to more of calling forth and so forth. I tried to take a lot of the commands out and put more of like I call you forth type of thing. So it's much more not so demanding and much more like, hey, come here. I call you by these names. I have offerings for you and so forth. So the protocols with conjurations, I think the names are needed. I think not all of the verbiage within the conjurations are needed exactly, but a lot of it is needed to get into that trance state. And also, there's some fine points in there that you want to keep in there to show some authority and so forth. And to be honest with you, like to forego all the safety measures to me is a bit naive.
Mm-hmm.
I think you should have them in place. I know that a lot of people see these spirits as kings and princes, and they almost like look at them as like they're gods of a new religion that they're now a part of, and they wouldn't hurt me. But the thing is about these spirits is the goetic spirits, they're like people. They aren't people, but they're like people to the point to where they have their own agendas. And just the like when I was talking about fire could burn you. Didn't It didn't burn you out of any malice in its nature, but that's just what it does.
Yeah.
So I think us having these safety protocols are there, just like you have the ring of rocks around a campfire to keep it from spreading. Um, and and then to finish this off, to conclude this, um, it's like inviting a friend over for dinner. All right. Are you going to order pizza, or are you going to cook them dinner, serve them wine over a well dressed dinner table? And I kind of see if you forego all of the protocols, all of the techniques, you're ordering pizza. But
Yeah.
when you have all of this effort and work put into it just so you could call this one spirit, it shows a lot of respect to not just the tradition, but to also the spirit as well.
Exactly. I like that. I like that answer a lot. Thank you. Um,
Hmm.
so before I give my answer, let me say he mentioned J.O. Sophia or J.O. Sophia, however you say it, by the late great J. Stratton Kent. It's from Scarlet Imprint in 2 volumes. I urge every single person, if you have an interest in grimoire tradition, if you have an interest in Goetia, if you have an interest in Hellenic magic, if you have an interest in the Hellenic origins of necromancy, um, check that out. Uh, it's groundbreaking for Western ceremonial magic. Um,
It
it,
does
it,
get a little dense. It does get a little dense, but you just have to put up.
it I mean, yeah, that's why it's broken up into 2 volumes. But yeah, if you have an opportunity to get J.L. Sophia, whether it's the physical copy or an ebook, please do pick that up. Um, it's Geo Sophia, Geosophia, the Geo Sophia or the Geo Sophia, whatever, by Jake Stratton Kent. It's published through Scarlet Imprint, although you probably can't get it from them anymore. Well, no, wait, they do the paperback versions now, so you should be able to still get it from them.
Yeah, I have the paperback version. The hardcover versions are like $500 or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, if you're willing to spend it, it's certainly worth it, but you don't have to. You can certainly get the paperback or an ebook. And if you're worried about any sort of differences between the paperback and the hardback, I promise you, it's literally the covers. The content is exactly the same.
Oh,
So,
it's a beautifully bound book. Like it's like not thin. It is made of great material. I love it. It's
yeah, a Scarlet Imprint's not going to do you guys wrong, whether it's a paperback or a hardback. I don't think I have any of their paperbacks. I've got a lot of their hardback. I don't have any paperbacks by Scarlet Imprint. I think so. Um, but so for my answer, um, is it possible to contact spirits? I mean, well, just specifically Goetia spirits, um, without the magic of Solomon? Uh, yes, short answer. However, the long answer is still a yes, but you may want to reevaluate, you know, why you're doing it that way. Um, so, in my opinion, outside of the ATRs, and again, I don't study anything from the East, so I wouldn't know about their systems or their traditions. So when it comes to the West, and that's everything literally from Russia on over to us, is considered Western philosophy, Western ceremonialism. So anything from Russia on over would be Western. In the West, in my opinion, aside from the ATRs and the ADRs, um, grimoire tradition has the best spirit communication system in the occult. It's foolproof. It's just not going to work if you fuck up. If you mess up, it's just not going to work. You're just not going to get anything. So there's no worry about any sort of negative. Now, if you do get the spirit to come and then you fuck it up after that, then you got to worry about something. But if you mess up in the beginning and you use the wrong ingredients or use the wrong metals or whatever, assuming that you're going with a purist method, then you should be good. Uh, but you don't need to go through all of that. There are ways to be able to get in touch with these spirits without any of the rigmarole of grimoire tradition. But the issue is you don't have the protections, as Quinn was talking about with grimoire tradition. You don't have the verification. So whatever spirit shows up, you just have to hope and trust and pray that that's the spirit that you wanted, right? When it could be any spirit. Now, of course, you would ask, well, why would a spirit that I didn't call come? Well, because if you know anything about real spirit work, you have to give something to that spirit in order for it to do any work for you. So if a spirit can come and get something from you for free without giving you anything in return, it's going to do that. Especially because most of the population, especially in the West, don't work with spirits. So that means the vast majority of spirits that are in your general vicinity are not getting any sort of veneration, worship, or energy from anybody. So they're going to take it from whoever's going to give it. And so if you're going to freely give it, they're going to take it. And I'm sorry to say it this way, but if you're dumb enough to believe whatever the spirit says, then they're going to take advantage of you. Just like if you're dumb enough to go down the alleyway with the guy, downtown who's, "Psst, psst, psst, I got the deals over here. Come, I got the Jordan shoes. I got the new purse," and you're dumb enough to follow him down the alleyway, then you're going to get mugged. That's just what's going to happen. Well, if you're dumb enough to believe a spirit that just tells you whatever and you don't verify, then it's going to take advantage of it. So grimoire tradition and the methods of Solomon remove all of that guesswork, right? It takes the guesswork out of everything. It takes the guesswork out of, well, what happens if I do all of this stuff but nothing happens? Then nothing happened, right? It's very to the point, very logical. There is no, oh well, is your chakras balanced? And oh, did you meditate to the moon and all this other bull crap? Did you do the work? Did the spirit show up, or was there any kind of sign? No, nothing happened. Move on to the next thing, or try again, or whatever. Right? There is no room for mental masturbation. There is no room for thinking something is there when it's not, and all this other stuff. It removes all of that. It's 100% foolproof, and I I personally can't see uh, valid reason why someone would want to contact a Goetic entity. I don't care about angels or the elementals or the genius loci or whatever, but to contact one of the 72 without the methods that they not only agreed to, as we see in Agrippa's fourth book, or pseudo Agrippa's fourth book, this is the methods that they are accustomed to. And who are we to just come in there and go, you know what? I know that your culture says that this is what I'm supposed to do and call you with. I don't care about all that. I'm just going to grab an old sock, some gum, a shoe, and a trash can, and I'm going to call it an evocation. And it's like, you can't do that. So while you don't need all of the traditional implements, you can certainly do chaos magic and contact them, or witchcraft and contact them, or voodoo and contact them. I would not recommend it. Just like I wouldn't recommend you contacting any of the Eshus or any of the Pombagiras without going through Kimbanda. I do not recommend you using witchcraft to contact Eshu Morea or Eshu Siete uh, crossroads and Cruzida or something. I don't speak Portuguese, but whatever the crossroads word is, you should probably use Kimbanda to contact him. You probably shouldn't be using, you know, tantric conjure or something like that, or else things could go a little crazy and you might not know how to get out of it. So, uh, yes, you can contact them without using the methods of Solomon, but I would not recommend it, and I can't see why you'd want to. Um, if you're broke, or if you don't want to follow the methods, like if you have an aversion to Abrahamism, that's fine. There are other spirits out there that can do exactly what the Goetic spirits can do, and don't require you to go through all of the nonsense. So just find someone else to work with, is what I would suggest. So.
And let me touch on a point that, like, we have a lot of people on TikTok these days that, they talk praise King this and King Paimon that, I have a few acquaintances on here that I get along with very well that, follow that line of work. But me personally, I don't really believe that a lot of these people who are just meditating on these personifications of forces or energies, that they're actually getting in touch with the actual spirit and essence of what we're talking about within the 72 goetic spirits. I really think it's more like, when you're meditating on these spirits, it's more so that you are getting in touch with a particular virtue that um, that is expressed by that spirit, not the actual spirit. You know what I mean? You're just getting your. It's like, you could smell the tacos, but you're not actually getting the tacos and eating them.
Exactly.
You could you could be like, that. Those are tacos. I know
I
that's
like
I
that.
know that's carne asada, but you're not actually eating it. So I know I would get some hate from some people on that, but I'm not saying that it doesn't work, because if it works for you and there's some self development there, then go for it. It's like the same thing when, prisoners that have been locked up for 20 years and they find God. It's like, dude, if you're a Christian now and that makes you a better person, go for it. You know what I mean? So, and that's how I feel about the more modern practices with the Goetia and so forth, or the Goetic spirits. But there's a difference between conjuring a spirit and then working, quote unquote, with the spirit.
Thank you. Amen. It's funny that you say that, because I was talking on Twitter today with someone about that. Georgina Rose's old co-hosts or whatever. I'm in those circles, and one of them had brought up the topic of working with, but they did it in the term of working with deities, and they were like, I don't really like that term, working with deities, because that makes it seem like deities and you are equal because you work with people that are equal with you, right? Whereas they're deities and you're a human, so there's this imbalance. And I chimed in. I was like, well, I don't do any deity work, so I don't know about all that. But when I, do engage with spirits, I tend to not like the term working with, because it's so loose, right? What does working with constitute, right? Is it a full blown evocation? I can see you through the scrying device or physically, although that's super super hard, but physically, or is me putting a candle on top of your sigil and meditating on it? Is that working with? Is making a mojo hand under your auspices at your altar with the items that are sympathetic to you, is that working with? If I do dream work under your name, is that working with? Or are all those things working with? Is there levels to working with? So I don't know, I don't like that term because it's so loose. And then also when you throw in the hmm, how do I say this? The new agey type of occultists, which are mainly the newer ones, right? The ones who just started yesterday. Those are the ones who tend to still have like the new agey beliefs. Um, they'll come in and they'll claim that they're working with Lucifer. And then you ask them, okay, well, how did you, or anybody, Hecate, whatever, Michael, and you ask them, oh, well, what are you doing? Like, how are you getting in touch with them? And they tell you, and it's like, you're not doing anything to initiate contact. So you're using the term working with, but you're not doing anything. So
Hmm.
what is working with, right? So that's why I don't like that term because everyone's using it, and everyone means something different when they say it, and I don't know. I just don't like that. So I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah, for sure. The working with my ancestors is for sure going to be different than me working with a spirit that I just evoked.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly,
there's going to be different consequences to both of those workings and so forth.
exactly. All right, so we can move on to here to the final topic, and then we'll do a few minutes of a Q&A, and then we'll end it out here, guys. Excuse me. Topic number 4 is about spirit houses, spirit boxes, spirit pots, or any type of other fetish item. So for those of you who are regulars here, you'll know that I have a fetish. I have a servitor housed in my fetish here, with a bunch of these sigils and things on it. So it's pretty cool. And I before this fetish, I've always been fascinated by fetish work. I remember when I was running the forum, um, I I would beg the ATRs, the ATR practitioners that were there to teach me how to make a fetish, right? Like how to actually build a proper one. I don't know because back then the only books that I was finding on fetish making was by Carlos Montenegro, and he has a bad reputation in the Kimbanda and the Palo communities as being a fraudster and someone who might be of like Brazilian descent, but he's lying about his family and his initiations and all that. So I didn't want to go with what I was reading from him. Um, and unfortunately, I didn't have anybody, step up to teach me. I had to essentially figure it out on my own. But luckily, I got to talk to ConjureMan Ali, and he put me on the right path to Afefe Ogi's Kindoki, which taught me how to make my own. But it's always fascinated me about being able to harness a intelligence inside of a device. Of course, the device is fashioned to house uh, the spirit. It's built to all of its sympathies. But something like that has always fascinated me. So you have a direct, not connection, a direct uh,
Link.
uh, link, I guess, or like a direct access to the spirit, right? And depending on the type of spirit, it may actually be bound to that object, or the object could only act as an anchor or a portal, like with deities. Um, but what are your thoughts on fetish work and fetish items?
So I just got done. I in I inhabited my spirit or my brass vessel, which I use as a spirit
Nice.
pot for the spirit that I just evoked last Thursday. Um, which
Are you able to say what kind of spirit it is or no?
Oh, I chose it was a prince seer
Okay,
uh, from
nice.
the Goetia. One of the spirits that were actually added that weren't part of the Pseudomonarchia Daemonum or Reginald Scott's register. So
Hmm.
it's one of those four spirits that were just added to the Ars Goetia out of nowhere. But yeah, the I had just filled this with things that are, that correspond with the spirit, and there's zodiacal and planetary sympathies and so forth. And as being pretty much a beginner at this stuff, even though I like to talk a lot about this, I am still a beginner, so I am still trying to learn how to here I go using the word work with this vessel, you know, even though through the past days I did have a few like signs of it kind of talking to me. For instance, I think it was Monday, I tried lighting some leftover tea light candles, 3 in a row, and they all went out before they could burn up the leftover wax. So I was like,
Oh wow.
okay, yeah, you obviously don't want anything to do with these tea lights right now.
Give you
And so
something
I kind of
stronger.
took it like, all right, there's something going on within this pot. Um, I wish I was more of a medium to be able to tell, for sure, but I won't know for a fact until my results come through and my petition is filled out,
Okay.
which I until May for no at the from the beginning of May for that to happen.
Okay.
So now it's just chilling in there. Um, but that is just one of the ways that you could bind a spirit to an object. As we know, in my own bay, Palo Mayombe, they got the Nanga jars.
Hmm.
Uh, well, we were just talking about chimeric bindings and stuff. They don't use chimeric skeletons, but there's I don't know if all practitioners or tatas of Palomayombe use skeletal
There's
remains
usually a
of
skull in
people.
there, yeah.
Yeah, so that becomes something of something for them to I don't want to say infest, but to embody. It gives them
Mm.
something to cling to, I suppose, and that becomes a sort of like a sign of a covenant or pact between
I
the
do.
spirit and the Tata. So I wish I knew more about that stuff, but like you said, the Carlos Montenegro, that's the only book I have on Paul Mayame is from him, and I'm like, God damn, man, I wish
Check
it.
out the one by Nicolaj de Matos Friswold, The Garden of Blood and Bones.
Garden of Blood and Bones. Okay, I think I might have seen that one on Amazon. I'm gonna have to check that one out.
Yeah.
But so you have the jars, you have the pots. You could even think of other objects like a doll. What are they called? A poppet? A poppet?
Puppets.
Yeah, you
Or
get
doll babies.
yeah, or doll babies. Then you could have say maybe a painting that we all know that there's like haunted antiques out there where they bind themselves to chairs and antique furniture and paintings and so forth, clocks and everything like that. So you could bind spirits to a lot of different objects. Um, but I think that would for sure be a little different from actually binding a spirit intentionally to an object so you could have a relationship and there's an exchange of offerings and a fulfillment of a petition.
Mhm.
So you have the vessel, then which with like my pot that I was talking about, my brass vessel. Then you have the binding to an oath, which it could be a binding to a petition that you set forth for the spirit, or binding it in the oath, as in we talked about with the Nanga being at like a significator of that oath between the Tata and the spirit. And then you could also bind a spirit to like an amulet or a talisman. Or you can ask a spirit to imbue that talisman with their particular nature or virtue of office,
Hmm.
like King of Solomon Pentacles. You'll see a lot of people they will draw these Solomonic pentacles on a lined piece of paper and hope to God that it brings them prosperity. But to be honest with you, you need to conjure these spirits and ask them to imbue this actual pentacle with their virtue. You have to ask them to lend themselves to it. They aren't exactly binding themselves to it, but they are enforcing it. With their energy is such an ambiguous word, but um, so then this amulet or this pentacle or talisman has now, like, say, if you conjured the Martian spirit, is now something that is protective, and anyone that tries to, you know, attack you might get attacked spiritually or mentally by in another instance, and so forth. That's just an example. But these bind so when you conjure these spirits and then you ask them to imbue these pentacles with their nature, like for instance, you want luck and prosperity, you conjure the Jupiterian spirits and you ask them to imbue this pentacle, and then now this pentacle that you wrote on vellum is now activated and it is now charged.
Yep.
And so that is also kind of binding, but not exactly binding an actual spirit to it. It is just now in favor of those particular planetary spirits. Um, so, you know, I should probably touch on the fact that a lot of people these days see this as like trapping the spirits, you know. Um, but and that's what Solomonic magic usually gets a lot of flack for that. Oh, you're trapping spirits, and it's like, no, we're not trapping spirits. You got to remember that there is a long history of ghosts latching themselves to physical objects.
Mm-hmm.
So they enjoy that. They want something physical. Whether it reminds them of what they used to be or they feed off of it, whatever it may be. But and then also you could use skulls and so forth. Like Father Ashen Kassan talks about his house spirit. Hiram is in a skull that he sourced in South America, a human skull, ethically sourced as far as he knows. Um,
I'm sure.
and yeah, it becomes a great receptacle for these spirits, and it is a great way to venerate them. It's a great way to give them offerings and a nice anchor there to when you want to communicate with them a bit more easily or petition them easily without going through all of the rigmarole of the Goetic ritual or Solomonic rituals. You have that spirit pot right there that you could just they kind of become like your familiar,
Yeah.
your auxiliary spirit, in a sense. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's been something that's been practiced across multiple traditions for since antiquity, all the way since Mesopotamia. So I think it probably isn't the first thing you're going to do when you get into witchcraft or magic. Excuse me. But
It definitely shouldn't be the first thing you do.
yeah, it should not be the first thing you do. Um, but it is I think it is one of the best ways to get magic done other than knowledge and conversation with your holy guardian angel.
I agree. I agree. And it's very interesting that you brought up Pelo Meombe and the Ngenga, or the Nkisi, because the method that I had learned from the sources that ConjureMan Ali had pointed me to, it's extremely similar to what we see in Palo, in which you would have a pot, and usually the pot is super large, like a cauldron almost. And within this pot, you would put items that, how do I want to say this? You would put items that not only represent the dead, So that way, the spirit of the dead that you put in there can be at home, so to speak. But you also would put items in there that the spirit can utilize to assist you in your magical workings, whether that's protection, whether that's getting you money, whether that's finding out information, whether that's divination, whatever. So things like I think one of them was like 3 machetes, and that's for like attacking, so that way it could tap into the energy of what a machete is used for and be able to defend or attack if you send it out to attack. You needed dried hummingbirds, which is illegal in the U.S., so I don't know how anyone in the U.S. is supposed to do this. But yeah, you would need to get your hands on dried hummingbird. And the reason for that is because of their hearts and how fast their hearts beat, which allows them to move at pretty great speeds, but also slow down and sort of be in the moment, if you will, like while they're feeding. So that would allow the spirit to be able to tap into moving super fast if you needed to do something fast, or taking its time and making sure something gets done properly, and so on and so forth. So it's interesting that you brought that up because it's very similar to a method that I am familiar with. Um, but
Yeah, I
oh,
did the
sorry,
same
Greg.
thing. I did the same thing for my pot of like putting in, a certain type of dirt, putting in things that were not just corresponding to Jupiter, and the spirit, but also putting some ashes of $4 in there, as four is corresponds to Jupiter. Burnt up $4. My wife wasn't too happy seeing me do that. Put some coins in there, and just things that like what have it to things that it could work with and so forth. But as you were saying, it was cool that you were saying like you put into that heart of a hummingbird, so it speeds it up, so the work is fast, but also takes its time,
Mhm.
and that's pretty awesome. It kind of reminded me of how like you'll use like garlic or ginger to kind of make a work hot, like because they're hot ingredients, so it'll
Yeah,
kind of speed up the process and so forth, and they're sympathetic to that particular hot and cold aspect. Uh, and it's funny because we were talking about the chimeric spirits earlier, but then when you think about these pots with the machetes and the different skull and all these different things, it's chimeric in essence because it
yeah,
is embodying all these different forces, but it's just not animals, it's different materials.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, it's been about a year or so since I've been working with my fetish item. Prior to this, I've not worked with a fetish. As I said, I've for years have always wanted to and didn't trust the sources I was finding. And unfortunately, because I'm an outsider, I was not part of any sort of ATR or official ADR group. Nobody wanted to teach me. Um, but yeah, so. All right, that concludes the topics for this evening, guys. Those were the 4 topics that Quinn and I wanted to touch on this evening for both our benefit and yours as well. So I hope you guys learned a lot. So now we'll go ahead and we'll move into a bit of a Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and Quinn and I will do our best to answer them, and then we'll go ahead and we'll close it out after that. So thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. Appreciate the likes. And I saw someone gave me a rose earlier. Thank you for that. I truly appreciate that. And let's see here. A lot of people use coffee for speed. Interesting. I've never heard of at least not anyone that I know, but I can definitely see that since caffeine, and it's used to keep you energetic and up and about. So I can definitely see that. Very, very interesting. Coffee for speed. Okay. Always love listening to your approach on this whole run. Well, thank you very much, Random Robert. Ghost Ghost Beard. Sounds like a character in a game or something.
So I have a question from the
Okay.
minimalist witch here, who I will be also doing a live with. tomorrow.
Nice.
Um,
Awesome. That's
7
that's great.
p.m. time. Yeah. Um, she reached out to me. She comes from more of a witchcraft perspective, but I think she saw like my Solomonic approach to magic and so forth, so was interested in that. But she's wondering, what is your take on evolution with the divine? Are the divine also evolving? Divine
I would.
beings, deities, spirits, and so forth.
So I don't think that spirits evolve in the way that we're probably thinking. I think that it's us and our needs that evolve, and the spirits can rise to meet that challenge or not. Also, I think within grimoire tradition, there's a common misconception that people think that when you, well, at least with the Goetic spirits, that when you call them, that they're the ones doing the job, and that's a rarity, almost to the point where that never happens. They usually delegate out to a lesser being, and these spirits rule over thousands of spirits. So chances are they have a spirit under their command that governs or has power or authority over whatever it is that you want done. So while you might call Basaga, or you might call, Buer or Citri or Simiges or Shax or Stolas or whatever, and ask for something specific, they probably won't do it. And many grimoires will tell you that they'll come on the first call, they'll do the initial deal signing, sort of like in Hollywood. The owner of the agency, the owner of the studio will meet you for your first movie. Hey, welcome aboard. Oh, great. We're so great to have you here. But once you're in, you're never going to see him again until you become like Tom Cruise, Denzel Washington level. You're never going to see them again, right? They'll send the lesser people to come and deal with you until you start showing them that you can make them money. But when you first sign on the dotted line, yes, Ari Emanuel is there to meet you. But I promise you, unless your next movie does $1 billion at the box office, you will never see Ari Emanuel again. He's the CEO of WME, the largest agency in the world. But anyway, so spirits are kind of the same way. They'll show up, for the first signing, but once you're in, they're going to send the lessers to deal with you. Unless you're, given crazy offerings and you do a lot of work with them, they're probably not going to come see you. So chances are there are spirits that, if you're going to deal with the Goetics, they have spirits under them that govern what you want. So while it might seem like, oh, Bune, he's, or some people say it's a she, but he's, makes men eloquent and witty, and he changes the place of the dead and all this stuff. But now all of a sudden he rules over money. Well, maybe not. Maybe Bune has someone under his command that does deal with money, and he gave the job to that person, or not person, but that spirit. And so now, when it comes to deities and stuff like that, um, I don't think they evolve. I think that they're we as humans pick and choose. So for the longest time, right, it's been, the Greeks, the Romans, and the Egyptians. They've been the popular ones. Now it's the Norse deities are becoming super popular, and some Asian deities are becoming super popular. So I don't think they evolve. I think people just switch around, because I don't recall. I mean, I'm not a historian or a folklorist or anything like that, but I don't recall, Zeus ever being anything other than the father of the gods, right? I don't ever recall him being something else. And then over time, he became the father of the gods, right? I don't ever recall, Amun Ra being anything other than the creator in Egyptian, lore. So I don't know, or I don't know if I would agree if spirits evolve. I think humans, and our needs evolve, and then we find the spirits that can rise to meet that challenge. So,
Yeah, we evolve in what we need the gods and the spirits for evolves. So just like you said, that's what changes. To be honest with you, I'll use the analogy of fire again. Fire has looked the same now as it did back in the caveman days, and it's gone through very many different names, but it's
mhm,
still the same. And that's how
right.
I see a lot of like a lot of the deities. You could, whether you're talking about Inanna, Ishtar, Hathor, whatever, a lot of these gods that migrated from this city state to that city state, lower to Upper Egypt, Babylon and throughout Mesopotamia, they will assimilate other goddesses and other names and other traits, but they still kind of have this consistent stream of fertility and war and so forth. So I don't think the goddesses or gods are like, oh no, that you got to go to Ishtar for this one. They already know what that you are trying to appeal to a particular force that they personify, and they don't have any, they're not going to get picky about that. And so yeah, I don't think they evolve. And same thing with like the goetic spirits. I don't think they evolve. They just learn to adapt to our needs. You know, um, they didn't care if you're asking for money for your corporation or asking for money for your farm. You're just asking for money, and
Yeah,
that's what their what that particular spirit's nature might be about. So I don't see them as a need having the need to evolve or evolving. It's just the way we see them probably evolves, what we need them for evolves, but they themselves, they personify forces that are cosmic and that will stay the same until for infinity.
exactly, exactly. Thank you for that question. Um, on my side, Drew Dizzy is asking Rebel and Quinn, is there any correlation or difference with ancestors or spirits and our oversoul? On my side, I'm going to ask, what do you mean by oversoul? I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. Quinn, I'm not sure if you want to take a shot at the question.
What can you repeat that?
Um, is there any correlation or difference with ancestors or spirits and our oversoul?
Oversoul, do they mean like something like the Akashic records or something like that?
I
Or
have I
like
have no idea. I hope
a
that they
one
Drew, can you elaborate on what you mean by oversoul? And while we wait for that, we can move on to another question here. Let's see. Let's see. I've seen my first hummingbird today. That's nice, Karen. That's nice. If it
the
dies,
minimal
uh, take it.
says right here oversoul. The oversoul is seen as one source energy of consciousness. So kind of
Hmm,
like a radio station that just kind of gives off our consciousness from a single point, I guess you could say. Um, so
interesting. Oh,
yeah, kind of like an Akashic field, kind of like a supreme consciousness of
I
all that has and all that will be. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't. Hmm. No, I don't think that there's any correlation there. I would say that the ancestors and any sort of spirit can operate independently of that. Just like we can be in the world, but we're not like of the world. We can operate independently of whatever's happening in the world or around us. And so I would say spirits can certainly do the same, while they exist within, I guess, your version of the oversoul. They certainly are not beholden to it. They can, act independently and of their own volition. Of course, certainly within the bounds of, whatever bounds they are ascribed to per whatever culture they come from. But yeah, that's how I would answer
You
that.
know, maybe you could see it through like a perspective that all of the deceased, all of the humans that have of mankind that have deceased are everyone's ancestors, I guess is what they're trying to get at. Maybe it's someone trying to find a way to consider that all of the dead are considered their ancestors, because
Sure.
there is a particular approach in like with saints, you know what I mean? Or like in ceremonial magic, who you'll appeal to Saint Cyprian, you could appeal to King Solomon, and that could be somewhat seen as magical ancestors, but
Hmm.
not like blood ancestors. So maybe that's what they're kind of like looking at this whole
I see.
if
Okay.
had anything to do with the oversoul, meaning that really everyone's ancestors is everyone's ancestors.
Yeah, I think that uh the name of the author has escaped me right now, but I think whomever wrote Patty Wigington, I think it was, whoever wrote Badass Ancestors, I think they talk about the concept of not necessarily going with blood ancestors, but traditional ancestors, like ancestors of a tradition. Like if you like, so for example, I'm a Hermeticist, so I could say Hermes Trismegistus is my ancestor, you know, and sort of that sort of thing. Um, or I guess if you're going to go with Christianity, you know, all the church fathers, all the saints, all the confessors, all the martyrs, all the popes, all the bishops that came before would be considered ancestors, right? Um, if that is what they mean, then I certainly don't argue with that. I don't have an issue with ancestors per tradition or lineage. And I don't mean blood lineage, I mean spiritual lineage, like elders that go back, um, or anything like that. I think that's all valid. So I never experienced a deity evolving. I evolve and they drop off. Yeah, yeah, your needs would evolve. So you would tend to find a spirit that can work with those needs. So I agree with that. Hmm. Maybe elites are in control because we worship their servitors. Well, it would be an egregore, since it would be a collective thing for them. But that's an interesting take. Um, I don't know if we would worship. Well, I mean, I guess technically, you know, it's not, you know, bowing down, but we're giving a lot of what the elites own a lot of attention, and some people could see that as a form of veneration or worship.
Yeah, consumerism.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of find it hard to like it was it's supposed to be some long ancestral lineage from, you know, from antiquity that some like cabal that has survived blood lineage till now, and all of the gods that we worship now have been worshipped since the times of Sumer and so forth. I don't I don't know. I don't want to get into that.
Why couldn't I have been born in something like that? I would love to be a wealthy psychopath. No, I'm kidding. Have you guys had paranormal experiences, shadow people, ETs, and if so, have they increased since practicing? So I'll answer that first. The only paranormal experience that I've had outside of ritual is the shadow beings. No, it has not increased since I started practicing. It's only happened, well, I guess maybe yes, because it didn't happen before I started practicing. But then again, I started practicing when I was 13. So, I mean, I don't remember if I ever had shadow beings when I was 8 or something like that. Um, but so technically, it didn't start until after I did start practicing, but it was well after. I didn't start seeing shadow beings until my mid 20s, and I started when I was 13. And it only happened like 3 or 4 times, and then it stopped around like 26, 27. And I'm 33 now, so I haven't had it since, and I've only gone deeper into the occult. So no, and ETs, I don't agree that ETs are contacting anybody on Earth, at least not anybody who's not a world leader or a super billionaire that can afford contact. Other than that, I don't think that they're contacting anybody on Earth. No one is that special. Again, unless you are a world leader or have the money to be that special. No, I've never been contacted by any aliens or ETs, and I am quick to dismiss, on the grounds of no occult, esoteric, or mystical foundation of anybody who claims any sort of ET contact. So that's how I would answer that. And I'll let Quinn give his response.
When it comes to I usually keep, although there might be a link between like extraterrestrials and like magic, because obviously, since magic works, it's the mechanism of the cosmos. So there's a good chance that they know how to harness the power of magic. But I usually like to keep the whole conspiracy of extraterrestrials and magic separate. Once you combine those two, you have two topics that are just floating off in the ether, and you're getting nowhere with any of them.
Exactly.
So even though I have a different opinion than Joe, I do think that there are possibly some people that might have seen some type of extraterrestrial, you know, activity going on somewhere in the sky and so forth, whether it be actual government airplanes or something from outer space, or there's people who've dealt with lost time and so forth. I wasn't there. I can't say whether they're bullshitting or not, but they're interesting stories to say the least.
Very interesting.
Uh, I have seen some weird stuff in the sky before, but none of it I ever related to my occult practices. Now, when it comes to paranormal stuff, when I first started doing my Solomonic magic, I was at the tail end of my Golden Dawn practice, and I was using conjurations and consecrations from my veritable Keys of Solomon, and those are particularly in Latin. And I was mixing these conjurations and consecration right in Latin with my Golden Dawn ritual, and we were getting some weird stuff going on in the house. Not a lot, but enough to notice that like something's going on. A plate flying off the wall like all the
Oh,
time.
wow.
Like yeah, it was the same plate. There wasn't any other things that were flying off, but it was just a very strange, strange situation because it seemed to fall differently every time it would fly off the wall. Um,
Interesting.
so yeah, it was a very interesting thing that happened. I remember hearing we don't use Siri in my house, but I remember one time waking up in the morning to use the restroom, uh, and I heard a disembodied voice say hello to me from the living room. And I live in a three-story duplex. So the kids are sleeping in the third story, and my wife was downstairs in our bedroom. So I was alone in the middle living room area, and I could hear from the living room a woman say hello. And I remember just being like, whoa, what was that? And that happened. My lady saw a white dog walking around in our backyard one night, and it was just like, all right. It got to the point where I was like, all right, it's not happening a lot, but enough to like I have to do something. So I consecrated a few wards with divine names written on them. Very simple, just little wooden plaques with Yohevave, Adonai, Eheye, and Agwa on them, written in Hebrew. I consecrated them and stuck them at the four quarters of my house. And ever since, nothing. Nothing. It doesn't even feel weird to walk around in the dark or anything. It's just so pleasant, and there's nothing foreboding about the energy of this house ever since I put those up. And something as
Awesome.
simple as that can do a lot.
Amen. Awesome. So guys, whenever I talk about shielding and warding and how I reinforce my shields weekly, yeah, that's why. So that way, I don't have to worry about any sort of nonsense.
And this goes back to what we were talking about with the safety protocols in Solomonic magic. And it's like you want to practice conjuring spirits without these protocols because they seem too lengthy and there's too much time to invest into these. Well, this type of activity is what you're trying to avoid with all of these safety protocols.
Exactly.
A thing came up in my head. I was like, hey, maybe I don't get as much of a paranormal answer to my conjurations because I do have all of this regalia and all of this stuff around me. Got this sword and I got the belt and I got this crown. And it's like maybe that's why I don't get as much of like a a knocking or like the
Yeah.
temperature of the cooling down because I do have all of this protective gear. So, I've thought about it maybe one of these days, like, hey, what if I try to do an experiment and forego everything that I have and see what happens? Live
I don't know.
dangerously.
I'd be afraid. I wouldn't. I don't know. I'd be scared. Is there any Indian grimoires? I am not familiar with any Indian grimoires. I wouldn't see why not, but I don't study anything from the East, so I can't say for sure. But I mean, I would like to think there would be Indian grimoires. Just Indian books of spirits that have the methods to contact them and their offices and attributes and what they like and all that other stuff. Yeah, I mean, I don't know for sure since I don't study anything from the East, but I would venture to state that there are, but I don't know for sure. I don't know if Quinn, if you've ever heard of any Indian grimoires.
No, you know what? And it's so funny because, like, when we're talking about the Far East like that, like when it comes to dealing with spirits, it's very much, it's like back in the, days of ancient Greece where magic was religion, and when you look at the way that they practice Hinduism over there, it's very much in line with a spirit-based religio magico style of worship going on. So I really wouldn't doubt there being one. I'm kind of like want to like put it into Google real quick and see if there is a grimoire from India.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
honestly,
someone in my chat says either the Gitas or maybe even the Vedas.
yeah.
But wouldn't those be more philosophical?
Yeah, I would think so. I would think so. They might have a different approach to communicating with spirits than us. The Western approach to spirit work is very much ceremonial, very much through the scope of, offerings and ceremonial rites and so forth. And then later on, the Catholic mass and so forth with the censoring and all that. But possibly since mysticism is so huge over there that they really don't see, they have their like devotional altars and so forth, and I'm sure that they have ways of constraining and binding like malevolent spirits, but their approach to working with spirits might be a little bit more inwards facing rather than exoteric.
Yeah. Quinn, Drew Dizzy has a question for you. It says, where did Quinn get those four names from? A particular Kabbalistic source?
The four names are I got them from the because I was so used to using the LBRP. So in the East you say you draw your pentagram and you vibrate the name Yohe Vavhe. In the South, yeah, the same thing, but you vibrate the name Adonai. In the West, vibrate the name Eheye, and in the
Hey,
North,
yeah. Yep.
the name
Sorry, good.
Allah, and then you finish with the Kabbalistic cross in the middle. But those names are seen throughout many different grimoires um, and magical texts. They are used in different permutations as well. Like you might see Shaddai instead of being spelled Haddai, you'll see like Saday.
Hey, why?
Um,
Yeah, Shaddai, yeah.
yeah, so and then also between Ashkenazic Hebrew and then like Sephardic Hebrew, you might have some different renderings of these names. Like sometimes a a tet might be in place of a semek or something. But these names have been around since like the PGM. You're going to find like a rendering of Yohe Vavhe, like you're going to find that in the PGM as Iao, and it's pretty much the same name, but just said differently and spelled
Yeah.
differently.
Yeah, the Gnostic version.
Yeah, so you're going to find these names, going all the way back to, ancient Greco-Egyptian magic, the Byzantine Empire and so forth, Alexandria and all that. So I didn't get them just from the LBRP, but I knew that they were used in other grimoires, so I used those because I was familiar with those names, and familiar with the Lesser Ritual of the Pentagram. So that's why I used those.
All right. Well, hopefully you accept that answer, Drew. Let's see here. Rhyme Clop says days later heard three loud slams on the floor in our old house from the floor where there's an unfinished basement. Days later had a dreamscape where everything is to scale except the entities. Still trying to get a question to what the white being on my ceiling was. Nobody's been able to answer it. I thought I was awake but was paralyzed and saw a white being on the ceiling. Rhyme Clops, that to me, that just, I mean, since you said you were paralyzed, that just sounds like sleep paralysis. Um, Unless you have seen that same thing, again, during multiple sleep paralysis sessions or something along those lines, or even outside of sleep paralysis, I would probably say there's no spiritual or occult or whatever reason behind it. It sounds just like sleep paralysis. But I don't know if Quinn, you have a different opinion.
Yeah, I'm from the perspective that because I will usually have a state of sleep paralysis before I would slip out of my body for my outer body experiences. Now I just know I'm in that state and I'm able to get up. And just by the way I float up when I get up out of bed, I know I'm in that state of being out of body, which it happened today. Um, but before, when I would be in this state of sleep paralysis, I would often hear spectral things going around. I feel something walking up and down on my bed. I felt like a pebble being thrown at me. I've heard my sister talking in the room, and she lives in California.
Oh
All
wow.
different weird stuff. Yeah. And I think that happens not because it could be hallucinate like dream hallucinations, but then also mixed with spectrals of this like limbo between the astral and physical realm.
Liminal
So
spaces.
so you it's hard to say, like, even if this was something that was of a like even if this white being was actually some type of spiritual being or entity, um, it's impossible to say exactly what it is unless you ask for its name and it replies to you, or you see it over and over again in dreams, and it finally gives you like a sign, like a sigil, a symbol or something, or a name. Other than that, the spirits are legion, just like it says in the Bible. So it's impossible to know exactly what this one thing was when we're considering everything that of what astral realm consists of.
Excellent. And yeah, Rhyme Clop says that is great. That is a great insight, bro. Thank you. So yeah, you're welcome. Uh, I definitely have experiences similar to that aren't in bed, and they leave definite feelings. And yeah, there might be something to that. If you're seeing it during the sleep state, and also when you're not in a sleep state, then there might be something to that. And also what Quinn suggested about asking it for its name and asking it to provide a sigil is also very important, which is something that we do in evocation, which is one way we verify. So that's what I would suggest. Uh, all right. We are coming up to the second hour, guys. So we are winding down here. Quinn, do you have any questions on your end? We got about
Uh,
5 minutes left.
I do have. It's not really a 5 minute answer, but we'll see what we could fit in with it. It's a pretty good
Okay.
question.
Okay.
What is the higher and the lower self?
What is the what is the higher and the lower self? Well, the lower self. Okay. So, are you asking in a Jungian psychological way? Because I do not agree with this, with the Jungian psychological model of magic. I follow the spirit model of magic. So, if you're looking for a psychoanalysis of the higher and lower self, I can't provide that because I don't agree with the Jungian psychological model of magic. But in Hermeticism, the higher and the lower self would be the true. The goal would be to fuse them in what we call the alchemical marriage. This is getting in touch with your HGA. So knowledge and conversation with your HGA would be the true alchemical marriage. And in Hermeticism, that would then make you a child of God. So a son or a daughter of God. So the lower self would be you presently. I know Jung would like to say it's your shadow, your id, and all that other stuff, but all that noise. Um, it would be you as you are now, right? You in your current unascended, unevolved, mundane state. And when you come into the knowledge and conversation of your HGA, which a lot of people do say is just your higher self, which Hermeticism doesn't go that far, but it goes far enough that you can see why someone would want to throw the ball just a little further. Um, when you come into the knowledge of your higher self or your HGA and you bring it down and then you bring yourself up to meet it. And this is another version of as above, so below, which we've been saying all night. So you bring the HGA down out of the heavens, and you rise yourself up from earth to the heavens, and you meet in the center, and you form that marriage, that union. This is the goal, at least while you're alive, for Hermeticism. So that's how we would explain the higher and lower self. The lower self would be you as you are now in your current state. The higher self would be your HGA, the potentiality of everything. And then when you merge those two together, you begin the great work. So that's how I would answer it.
So I actually kind of wrote a whole paper on kind of concerning this lower and higher self, uh, mostly having to do with the symbolism of the caduceus, Hermes caduceus. But so I can touch on a little bit of the more the Jungian psychological aspect of it, but it's more
Yeah.
of just a way to integrate it philosophically into the Kabbalistic um, sense of it. So, for instance, we have so if you look at the tree of life, these um, you have these four worlds. You have it's the Absolute, you have Yetzira, you have the Bria, no, Bira, Yetzira, Bria, Yetzira, and then Asaya. And then you could also assimilate our modes of consciousness into three of these. So, for instance, you have the Asiya would be your lower self. That would be your id. That would be your animalistic, instinctual desires and so forth. Make money, survive. The things that make you do bad things when you have to survive, in like a survival of the fittest situation, and that is your animal self. And then so that's your id, and then you have your ego. All of this is your personality together, but your ego, that's where everything gets filtered through. So you have your subconsciousness down in your id, and all of those subconscious things get filtered through your ego, and your ego also generates intake from the outer world. And so everything that you do in life, all the decisions that you make are all pretty much predetermined by what you take in through your ego and the way it's filtered through your emotions and subconscious and such. So this ego and this id are kind of controlling the way you conduct yourself throughout life. Now, we have this super ego, or you have the more of the Yetzirah, or the Absoluthian and Briatic world, where there's more of the higher aspirations, your higher self. Um, this is the part of our consciousness that makes us able to have faith in something we can't see, like a God or something beyond us, rather than just the material stuff that our animal self is so inclined to believe. Only the material things. But this super ego, us, those aspirations for something beyond us, is what helps us have religion, and it can be sometimes at a fault. But when we, as Joe was talking about integrating these two, you what the way I always saw it is, the simple way of putting it is, you integrate these two to where your desires are no longer longing for the material and the physical, but longing for a more divine interaction with something beyond this material world. So that is the integration of the lower with the higher self. And that happens on different planes. If you know of like the alchemical process, you know that you don't just go through that once throughout life spiritually. You go through it multiple times. Just like monks will say, you go through enlightenment multiple times. You don't just reach it and then you're done. Um, so it's just this thing of trying to make it to where your aims in life are no longer for these petty desires of, I want fast cars, I want supermodels, I want lots of money. No, it's instead of those types of things, it's for like, I want to provide for my family, I want to be a good father, a good mother, I want to help my community. And these are the things that now fulfill those desires. You no longer seek pleasure in those carnal sensations. You now seek pleasure in helping other people and love and so forth. So to me, that is the difference between the lower and the higher self. Your carnal desires, your animal instincts, and then your higher aspirations. And then the integration of those two is what Joe was talking about with the chemical marriage, or a certain way to look at the chemical marriage, or what is it, Red Queen or Red King and the White Queen,
Mhm.
I believe, yeah, which is it wasn't really written by Christian Rosicrucians, but it's attributed to him, I believe, right?
Yeah, I don't think it originated with Rosicrucianism, but as we I don't know if it was your live stream or Chemic Mason's live stream. Someone had asked a question about that, and I was like, I need to. I'm not so well versed on Rosicrucianism as I would like to be, so I can't give a definite on that.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, that's how I see the lower and the higher self. As children, we pretty much function off of our lower self, just going for those desires. And then as we get older and we start to intake things a little bit more, depending on how we see things, we tend to try and integrate our desires with something beyond us. So we live for a higher meaning. So, a
And there
little bit
you
of
have it,
mysticism
guys.
there.
And this is exactly why this kind of thing is perfect, because it's not an echo chamber, right? I stated I don't agree with the psychological model, so I gave the more esoteric model of the higher and lower self. And Quinn does seem to agree with the Jungian psychological model. So it's good that the audience got to hear both perspectives, and are able to go away with more knowledge than what they came in with. So that's why these sorts of dual live streams and these discourses are great, because they don't happen. So it's great that we can present both sides of a perspective to our audiences. Um, so
Yeah,
um,
let me clarify, not in the spirit sense. I don't agree with the psychological spirits are fragments of your imagination. I don't agree with that part.
I'm trying to find it. Somebody was Azrael Gill is interested in learning more about Kabbalah. So maybe before we head out here, we can give them some resources. I would recommend Lon Milo Duquette's Chicken Kabbalah. Super down to earth, super accessible, very humorous. I mean, it might be a little dated, but pretty humorous, and uh, elucidates on some more interesting concepts that some people might find a little more difficult. And also Dion Fortune's Mystical Kabbalah. Disregard like almost all of chapter one, and then go on from there. She has a lot of uh, well, it's from the 40s, so take that for
You have some racist shit in there.
yeah,
Not
yeah.
like
So
not
you
like
know,
blatantly not blatantly racist, but things are like,
yeah. So you might want to drop that. But other than that, the Kabbalistic info is phenomenal. But just understand that she's from another time. So yeah. But those are the two that I would recommend. I'm reading Shamanic Kabbalah by Daniel Moeller, but I don't feel comfortable recommending that if you're not interested in a shamanistic look at Kabbalah. And then Quinn, I don't know if you have any Kabbalah sources or resources, excuse me, for Avid Row.
So the more dense, you have the Sefer Yetzirah by Aria Kaplan. That is a headache in a book. Shows you
Yeah,
how to make
I didn't want to go all the way back to the
yeah,
beginning.
it shows you how to make a golem and all that. But it gives a little commentary on the Sefer Yetzirah. Uh, and then you also have like, of course, like this, particular books that are part of the Zohar, which is pretty much commentary on the uh, Kabbalistic commentary on the Pentateuch or the 5 books of Moses, Torah. And then you also have the Bahir, which is another Kabbalistic text. But all of those are pretty Kabbalistically dense, and they're a bit of like a puzzle if you're not initiated into the whole scheme of how Kabbalah works. But as Joe said, mystical Kabbalah, you just have to remember that she was old and racist. Um, then you have, I haven't read this one, but I heard it's a really good one, is Gareth Knight's Kabbalistic Symbolism or
Oh,
Symbolism of the Kabbalah.
I'm not familiar with
And
that one. I love Gareth Knight.
yeah, Gareth Knight was a student of Dion Fortune.
Hmm.
And so that is one I hear a lot about. There is the Kabbalah Unveiled by Samuel McGregor Mathers. It is a translation of, I forget what it's a translation of, the Kabbalah Denudata or something like that. And that's another pretty dense one that would be a puzzle to you. But I would say out of all of the Kabbalistic books that I like that really illuminated a lot of Kabbalistic information for me was the Kabbalistic Tarot by Robert Wayne. A lot of the Kabbalistic principles are explained. The Tree of Life is explained. The Sephirot and the paths are explained, not just as what they are and with an introduction to them, but also through the scope of tarot. And the tarot really, and when those are combined in conjunction with uh, those, the tarot really helps understand Kabbalah or Hermetic Kabbalah at that, and then understanding the Hermetic Kabbalah also helps you understand tarot through the Hermetic Kabbalah lens. But I really love that book. Even if you're not into tarot, it's a great introduction into the Kabbalah. And then there's also, of course, the Green Brick by Tabitha and Cheek Cicero, the self-initiation into the Golden Dawn tradition, which has a whole, through all the 4 grades, it gives you whole rundowns of Kabbalistic teachings and so forth for beginners. So that's also a good one.
Amen. I hope you got that yes, Kabbalistic symbolism. Yes, correct. And the mystical, yep, and the mystical Kabbalah and Chicken Kabbalah, and what was the tarot book you just mentioned?
The
Tarot,
Kabbalistic Tarot with a
the
Q.
Kabbalistic tarot. So check those four out. Israel Regardi has some great books. Yes, he does. He does. I'm a big fan of Regardi. I don't really. I won't say I don't agree. I don't follow his metaphysics necessarily, but I do. I do like his writings.
Yeah,
Um,
talk psychoanalytical. If you don't like Jung, yeah, then it's going to be hard to deal with Rigardi.
yeah. Yep. The Kabbalistic Tarot. Yep, that is correct. All right. Well, do you have any other questions on your end, Quinn?
No, actually, I do not right at this moment.
Okay. All right. Well, then, guys, I think we will go ahead and end it out here. We did a 2 hour stream this evening. It was fantastic. Great discussion with Quinn from Man of Medim and some excellent questions from the audience and commentary as well. So, thank you guys. Appreciate the support, the likes, the roses that were given. Thank you all. We do this every Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, please do join us next Tuesday. We'll be doing this again. Tomorrow, I'll be live with Alchemic Mason. We will be doing our weekly readings of the Corpus Hermeticum. So if you're interested in Hermetics, which I was talking a bit about tonight, please do join us tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And make sure you give Quinn a follow over at Man of Medim. He is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to Solomonic magic, especially in the traditional style. So please, if you have an interest in Grimtrad, Solomonic magic, Western esotericism, especially from a traditional point of view, please do give Man of Medim a follow. And Quinn, is there any final words you want to say before we close out here?
So far, just thanks everyone for joining this live. Both me and Joe are pretty easy to get a hold of. Don't be afraid of asking questions.
Yeah,
Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Mountain Time. That is my time. Me and the Minimalist Witch will be doing a live. She has a very
that's
different
awesome,
approach
dude.
from my approach. And she even said on this chat she thinks that she's probably one of the new age types. So it'll be a nice discourse. And I'm sure it'll go
That's
well.
awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, just go ahead and join in with that tomorrow if you'd like. Other than that, thank you everyone. I enjoyed myself. I enjoyed the questions, and I hope to get into this uh, every other week till possibly when I'm moving. When I'm moving, we might have to take a break, but
No
we'll
worries.
see.
No worries. All right. Well, guys, thank you all for being here. I truly. Oh, and also, if there's any other creators that you guys would like to see me go live with, do a double stream with, please do let me know. I'm sure Quinn would also accept any sort of suggestions if you are on his side of things and want to see him stream with some other creators. Please do let us know, and we'll see what we can do about getting them on here. Thank you for the follow.